I am Lori, 28 years old, and yesterday I became a millionaire. $2 million of Victorian mansion and full control of my late aunt's thriving business, her life's empire, handed entirely to me. The strangest part, I wasn't even ready to process her death when they appeared. Them. The parents who had abandoned me 15 years ago, without a goodbye, suddenly standing in the lawyer's office doorway as though summoned by fate. Their faces were familiar and foreign all at once, lined with time, their smiles too polished to feel real. "We are your guardians," my mother announced sweetly, as if the word had not been buried by years of silence. My father nodded, his eyes darting over the polished wood office like a man already taking inventory of what could be his. Before I could even find my voice, the door opened again. My aunt's lawyer, Mr. Thompson, walked in. Steady, silver-haired, his presence like a wall between me and them. The second they saw him, their smiles faltered. Their faces turned ghostly pale. Something inside me clenched. I didn't know then, but I felt it. They weren't here for me. They were here for what I had inherited. But before I tell you about the battle that unfolded, I need you to understand where I came from. To understand why their sudden return felt like a knife, reopening an old wound that had never fully healed. 15 years earlier, life had seemed, at least on the surface, normal. We lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment. My dad worked as a sales manager at a car dealership. My mom taught third grade at the local elementary. We weren't rich, but we weren't starving either. We had Friday movie nights, microwave popcorn piled high in plastic bowls. In the summers, we'd go camping in our secondhand tent, where Dad would burn marshmallows over the fire and laugh like a boy himself. Christmas mornings meant cinnamon rolls, and my mother's warm hugs under twinkling lights. I thought we were happy. I thought I was safe. But there were cracks, ones I was too young to recognize. The hushed arguments behind closed doors, voices sharp, then silenced when I entered. My father's mysterious phone calls taken outside in the hallway. The extra overtime shifts that smelled not of motor oil and car polish, but of stale cigarettes and liquor. At first, Dad's poker nights seemed harmless. He'd joke about winning enough for a new TV or a trip. But harmless games became whole weekends away in Atlantic City. I remember one night I must have been 12, waking to the sound of my mother sobbing in the kitchen. "Please stop before we lose everything," she begged him. His reply came slurred, full of promises he'd never keep. My mother changed too. Her once bright smile grew dim. She called in sick, more often spending days in bed with the curtains drawn. Some afternoons I'd find her staring at me with an intensity that unsettled me, as though memorizing my face before breaking into tears and locking herself in the bathroom. I tried to be the perfect daughter. Straight A's, never a complaint about my worn-out clothes cleaning the apartment without being asked. I thought if I could be good enough, they'd stop fighting. That maybe Mom would laugh again. That maybe Dad would come home smelling like soap instead of smoke and whiskey. But being perfect couldn't fix what was breaking. The day they left is carved into my memory like stone. It was a Tuesday in October. The morning was colder than it should have been for early fall. I remember pulling my blanket tighter, wondering why Mom hadn't woken me for school. The apartment felt wrong, too quiet, too empty. Their bedroom door was wide open, unusual. Mom always kept it shut on her bad days. Inside the closet gaped hangers swinging bare. Dresser drawers pulled out, only a few socks left behind. On the kitchen counter lay a single sheet of paper. 16 words in my mother's handwriting. "Lori, we cannot do this anymore. Your Aunt Vivian will take care of you. We are sorry." 16 words that ended my childhood. I stood there, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the silence. I dialed Mom's cell again and again, each unanswered ring a stab. Dad's number had already been disconnected. I searched the apartment, address books, hidden drawers, scraps of paper, but found nothing, just emptiness. At 13, I was suddenly alone. That night, I curled up on the living room couch lights on the phone clutched in my hand. Every sound made me jump, hoping it was them returning. My dinner was dry cereal eaten straight from the box. I cried until I couldn't breathe. The second day, the landlord banged on the door demanding overdue rent. When I stammered that my parents were away, he squinted suspicion in his eyes. "Maybe I should call social services," he muttered. Terror froze me. Foster care being taken from everything I knew, I wasn't ready for that. By the third day, hunger and fear crushed me. My school counselor noticed my pale face, my trembling voice. She called Child Protective Services. That's when Miss Dawson arrived, a social worker with kind eyes and a steady voice that felt like a blanket. She made calls, asked questions, pulled strings. Somehow she tracked down my father's estranged sister, Aunt Vivian. I still remember the words Miss Dawson said into the phone, "Your niece has been abandoned. The alternatives are foster care or you." There was a long pause. Then tomorrow morning would be best. She cannot stay in the apartment alone another night. The next day, Vivian arrived. She stepped out of a sleek black car that looked absurd against the graffiti-stained buildings of my neighborhood. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled tight into a bun, her charcoal gray suit impeccable. When her eyes landed on me, there was no warmth, no pity, just determination mixed with something unreadable. "Pack what you can carry," she said. Her voice was clipped but not unkind. "The rest can be shipped later." I obeyed, filling a single suitcase with clothes, my backpack with photo albums and favorite books. I left behind glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to my bedroom ceiling, a reminder of a life that had ended overnight. The drive to her mansion was 3 hours. She spoke little, asking only if I was hungry or needed the bathroom. I stared out the window, watching my world shrink in the rearview mirror. That was the day my old life died, and the day Vivian's world, my new world, began. I didn't know then that she would become both my strictest critic and my only true protector, or that 15 years later the parents who left me in that apartment would return not for love, but for the empire Vivian built and left in my hands. And I had no idea how far they'd go to claim it. The Tuesday they vanished still lives inside me, like a wound that never quite closes. When I woke that morning, the air felt colder than it should have been. The autumn sun hadn't yet burned through the mist outside our apartment windows, and everything seemed wrapped in a dull, gray silence. Normally, Mom would have called me at least twice by now, "Lori up. You'll miss the bus." But the apartment was too quiet, the kind of quiet that feels deliberate. I padded toward their bedroom, rubbing my eyes. The door stood wide open. That alone was wrong. Mom always kept it shut on her bad days as if her sadness needed walls. Inside it looked as though a storm had passed through. Drawers yanked out the closet gaping. Empty hangers dangled like skeletal fingers. I touched one still swinging as if someone had just brushed past. On the dresser, dust outlines showed where picture frames once stood. Their wedding photo, the one I used to stare at when they fought imagining happier days, was gone. And then I saw it. On the kitchen counter, under the fluorescent light that buzzed like it knew a secret, a single sheet of paper, 16 words in my mother's neat looping script. "Lori, we cannot do this anymore. Your Aunt Vivian will take care of you. We are sorry." I read it once, twice, again. The words blurred. I kept waiting for some hidden message to reveal itself, something that said, "Just kidding, we'll be back tonight." But there was nothing. I dropped the paper. My knees gave out, and I sat on the linoleum floor back against the fridge, hands shaking so badly I couldn't dial my mother's number right the first 3 tries, straight to voicemail. Dad's number. "This line has been disconnected." Gone. Just gone. The rest of that day is a haze of panic. I tore through the apartment, opening every drawer, every cupboard, like maybe they had left a clue, an address scribbled on the back of a bill, a number on a receipt. Anything. But all I found was emptiness. That night I stayed on the couch with the TV on mute, terrified of the silence. My dinner was dry cereal, straight from the box, the last of the milk already sour. I left the lights burning in every room. Every creak in the hallway made me sit upright, convinced they'd returned. But the door never opened. By the second day, the walls felt like they were closing in. The landlord came, his fist pounding so hard on the door it rattled the frame. "Rent's late again," he barked when I cracked it open. His eyes scanned the apartment behind me, suspicion sharp. "My parents, they're away," I stammered. His gaze lingered on my small frame, on the shadows under my eyes. "They'd better get back soon," he muttered, "or I'll be calling social services." The threat sliced through me. Foster care, strangers, losing everything familiar. My stomach churned with fear, but I said nothing. Just shut the door and leaned against it, trying not to crumble. By the third day, hunger gnawed at me harder than fear. I dragged myself to school thinking maybe routine would keep me sane. But when my counselor, Mrs. Parker, pulled me aside, I couldn't hold it together. One look at my pale face, trembling hands, and she didn't buy my lies. Within an hour, a social worker appeared, Miss Dawson. She was tall, with kind eyes, and a calm voice that reminded me of blankets fresh from the dryer. She sat with me in the counselor's office, not rushing, just letting me cry. "Lori," she said gently, "we've tried calling your parents. No one's answering. Do you have any relatives we can contact?" I shook my head, then froze. Aunt Vivian. My father's sister, the woman we only visited twice when I was younger. Strict, sharp-tongued someone my parents always said disapproved of their choices. She was practically a stranger. Miss Dawson made a call. I remember her words so clearly. Your niece has been abandoned. The alternatives are foster care or... She paused, listening. Yes. I understand it's sudden, but she has no one else. Tomorrow morning would be best. She cannot stay in the apartment alone another night. I sat there, my heart thudding, realizing my life had just split in two before the note and after. That night I went home one last time. The apartment felt hollow already, someone else's space. I packed quietly a few shirts, jeans, socks, my backpack stuffed with photo albums, my favorite book worn at the edges, a cracked snow globe Dad once won for me at a carnival. I paused at my bedroom door. The glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck to the ceiling years ago still faintly shimmered. I touched the wall, whispering goodbye as if the plaster could hear me. The next morning, the sleek black car pulled up. I watched from the window as Aunt Vivian stepped out a storm of elegance against our crumbling building. Her hair pulled into a tight bun, her pearls catching the weak sunlight. Her expression wasn't warm. It wasn't cruel either. It was resolute. "Pack what you can carry," she said when I opened the door. Her voice clipped efficient. "The rest can be shipped later." There was no hug, no comfort, just order. But in that moment, I clung to it. Order felt safer than chaos. As the social worker handled paperwork with the landlord, I lugged my suitcase down the stairs. At 13, I was leaving behind everything I'd known, waiting for parents who never came, clutching a note that explained nothing, and stepping into the care of an aunt who felt more like a stranger than family. I didn't know then that Vivian would save me in her own way, or that one day the very people who left me in that empty apartment would walk back into my life, smiling, ready to take everything she left me. Moving into Aunt Vivian's mansion felt like stepping into another universe. Her home was a sprawling Victorian structure, the kind you only see on glossy magazine covers. 2 acres of sculpted hedges, iron gates that opened with a code and windows so tall they reflected the sky like mirrors. When we pulled into the long driveway, I gripped my suitcase so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had never even been inside a house this big, let alone expected to live in one. Vivian didn't ask me what I thought. She simply said, "This is home now. You'll find it has rules. If you follow them, we won't have problems." That was her welcome speech. My bedroom alone was larger than our entire old apartment. Heavy velvet curtains sealed out the daylight, and the 4-poster bed looked like something stolen from a period drama. A vanity table gleamed under the chandelier, and antique wardrobes stood like silent guards along the walls. I should have been dazzled. Instead, I felt small like an intruder who had stumbled into a museum. Dinner that night was a formal affair. The dining room table stretched long enough to seat 20, but only the 2 of us sat there, silverware lined up like soldiers. Vivian served a simple meal, roast chicken, steamed vegetables, and wine for herself, water for me. She bowed her head briefly, not in prayer, but as though acknowledging a contract before beginning. "Breakfast is at 7 sharp," she said between bites. "Beds must be made before leaving your room. Shoes are never worn on hardwood. Piano practice for 1 hour daily talent is irrelevant. Discipline is the goal. Homework at the desk, not on the bed or couch. At dinner, we discuss at least 1 current event and 1 personal achievement. No television on weekdays." Her tone wasn't cruel, but absolute, as if these rules were laws of nature. I nodded mutely, but inside, anger flared. My parents had left me without warning, and now I was supposed to live like a soldier in boot camp. The first week was a disaster. I overslept the first morning. By the time I shuffled downstairs, the dining room was empty, the plates cleared. Vivian sat at the head of the table with coffee and a newspaper. "You're late," she said without looking up. I thought maybe... "The kitchen closes at 7:30. You'll wait until lunch." My stomach burned with hunger for the rest of the day, but she didn't waver. Another night I sprawled across the velvet couch with homework papers scattered around me. She walked in her heels, clicking sharply on the floor. "Homework is done at your desk." I snapped back. "Does it really matter where I do it?" Her eyes narrowed, but her voice remained calm. "It matters because rules create structure. Structure creates resilience. Chaos, on the other hand, creates collapse. You've had enough of that." Her words stung. I hated her for being right. Still, there were cracks in her armor moments when the stern businesswoman vanished, and someone else peeked through. One afternoon, I found an old wedding photo of my parents buried in the suitcase I had hastily packed. I stared at it until the faces blurred, tears spilling onto the frame. When Vivian entered and saw me, I braced for criticism. Instead, she silently handed me a crisp handkerchief, sat beside me, and waited until my sobs subsided. Not a word, just presence. Somehow that was enough. Another time I studied for hours for a math exam only to fail miserably. I expected ridicule, maybe even punishment. Instead, she hired a tutor, as if the failure were simply a logistical problem to solve. No lectures, no disappointment, just action. For a girl who had been told for years that everything was her fault, this was disarming. Vivian ran her life like a machine. She had built a chain of upscale home decor boutiques across 3 states from a small inheritance. She worked long hours, but was home every evening. Paperwork spread neatly across her study desk. On weekends, she sometimes took me along to business meetings. Observe, she instructed once as we sat in a polished conference room. Notice who speaks first, who holds silence, who gives ground, who doesn't. Business is human psychology applied to money. I didn't fully understand then, but I watched carefully. It was the first time an adult had asked me to notice the world with purpose, not just survive it. At night alone in that massive bedroom, I sometimes imagined my parents bursting through the door, laughing, saying it had all been a mistake. I drafted imaginary conversations. Why did you leave? Did you miss me? Did you love me? But the only answer was the rustle of velvet curtains. So I tried harder. Perfect grades, strict obedience, hoping that maybe if I pleased Vivian, I wouldn't be left again. Yet deep down, I knew pleasing her wasn't the point. She wasn't testing my worthiness. She was testing my strength. And as much as I resented her coldness, some part of me sensed she might be the one adult in my life who wouldn't walk away. Looking back now, I see those early months as the foundation. The discipline I hated would later become my armor. The order she forced on me would become the bones of the woman I had to grow into. At 13, though, I only knew this, I had lost the parents who gave me life. And in their place stood a woman who neither asked for me nor seemed to want me, yet refused to let me fall. I couldn't have known then how much that would matter, or how one day it would be the very thing that saved me when my parents came back, not with apologies, but with hunger in their eyes. Westfield Academy might as well have been a different planet. The halls buzzed with students in tailored uniforms, their polished shoes clicking on marble floors. Their families arrived in sleek cars, not the dented sedans I was used to. They spoke casually about ski trips, summer homes, and internships their parents arranged. I felt like an imposter clutching my thrift store backpack and struggling to understand half the academic jargon tossed around in class. The first semester nearly broke me. My grades, once my armor began to slip. Geometry proofs reduced me to tears. Essays bled red ink professors, scribbling unclear in the margins. My classmates whispered when I failed to answer questions, their amusement disguised as politeness. At night, I buried myself at the mahogany desk Vivian had assigned me, staring at textbooks until my eyes blurred. I wanted so badly to prove I belonged here, not just as some charity case Vivian had taken in. One evening, when I failed another math test, despite days of study, I slammed my pencil down in defeat. Maybe I'm not good enough, I muttered. Vivian, who had been reviewing financial reports nearby, looked up. Excuses are a waste of energy, she said. That's easy for you to say, I snapped, surprising even myself. You're perfect at everything. Her eyes narrowed. You think perfection built this house? No. Persistence did. Discipline did. Do not mistake struggle for failure. It wasn't the warm reassurance I craved, but it lodged in my mind. The next morning, I hired a peer tutor, using my allowance, and joined a study group. Slowly, painfully, my grades improved. By junior year, I was on the honor roll. But my victories didn't stop our battles. When the time came to apply for college, I dreamed of attending State University. Many of my friends were going there. It felt familiar, safe. Vivian had other plans. She pushed for Northwestern Cornell, anywhere prestigious. Our friends don't matter, I argued one night at dinner. It's my life, not a resume. Her fork paused midair. Your friends think about next weekend. I think about your next 20 years. You need to be strategic, not sentimental. The words cut. I never asked to be your project, I shot back. And I never asked to be your guardian, she replied coolly. The silence that followed felt like a chasm between us. Then softer. Yet here we are. I am trying to give you what your parents could not options. Do not squander them out of fear. I wanted to scream that I wasn't afraid. But deep down, I was. Leaving for an elite school felt like stepping onto a stage I wasn't sure I deserved to be on. A week later, she surprised me. We were sitting in her study when she closed. Her ledger leaned back and said, "You think I push you because I enjoy control. That's not true." I blinked, caught off guard. Vivian never volunteered explanations. "Your father," she continued, "was brilliant. He could solve complex math problems in his head, but our parents couldn't afford college. He pumped gas while I went to university on a scholarship. He resented me for years, tried to beat fate with shortcuts. That's where the gambling began." Her voice cracked slightly, a rare fracture in her polished tone. "I will not watch history repeat itself with you." For the first time, I glimpsed her fear, the grief she carried. For a brother lost long before he abandoned me. It softened something inside me. That night, I wrote applications to 7 universities, Northwestern among them. The acceptance letters rolled in months later, 5 in total. I chose Northwestern, not because Vivian demanded it, but because somewhere along the way, I wanted to prove her faith wasn't misplaced. She never said congratulations. Instead, she handed me a check for tuition and remarked, "The first decision of many. Make the next ones with the same clarity." But when I caught her reflection in the window that night, her lips curled into the faintest smile. College brought freedom. For the first time, I lived away from Vivian's shadow. I joined clubs, made friends who didn't know my history, and discovered a knack for marketing and design. Summers, I interned at her company, learning everything from supply chains to branding. Our relationship shifted. Phone calls became warmer, sometimes even playful. I once teased her about being addicted to her ledger books, and to my shock, she laughed. When I graduated with honors, she stood in the audience clapping once firmly, her expression unreadable. But when I found her afterward, she shook my hand and whispered, "Well done." The pride in her eyes said more than any hug could. Looking back, I see now that love takes many forms. My parents had given me warmth, but no stability. Vivian gave me discipline without affection, at least not the kind I recognized. Yet beneath her steel exterior was a loyalty more profound than any. "I love you," my parents had ever said. It wasn't the love I wanted as a child, but it was the love I needed to survive. And I couldn't know then that her version of love, unyielding, protective, pragmatic, would be the shield I needed when my parents returned, not to claim me, but to claim what she left behind. I thought I finally had balance in my life. After college, I returned home not to the apartment of my childhood, but to Vivian's mansion, which had become mine too, in all but name. I worked as marketing director at her company, Hughes Home Collections, learning to navigate boardrooms filled with sharp-eyed men twice my age. Vivian watched me carefully, correcting mistakes without hesitation, but she never once suggested I didn't belong. For the first time, I felt steady, rooted. Then came the diagnosis. It was 2 years ago, on a summer afternoon, heavy with cicadas. I found Vivian sitting unusually still in her study, her hand flat over a stack of medical papers. "Pancreatic cancer," she said, her voice even almost detached. "Advanced, inoperable." My chest tightened. "No, there must be options, treatments." "There are treatments," she said calmly, "but they buy time, not miracles. We all die, Lori. The question is when and how we use the time we have left." I broke down right there, clutching the edge of her desk as if holding on to it could stop the world from tilting. But she remained steady, her face unreadable, her tone pragmatic. "Don't waste tears on inevitabilities," she said. "Use them to water the strength you'll need." Her words were cold, yet beneath them I heard something else, fear. The months that followed unraveled everything I thought I knew about us. Vivian, the woman who had once seemed unshakable, began to fade. Her posture stooped, her voice weakened her. Once firm hands trembled when lifting a teacup. She insisted on working as long as she could, dictating memos from her armchair, reviewing reports with a pen clutched stubbornly between thinning fingers. But gradually the roles reversed. I became the enforcer, the one scheduling doctors' visits, arranging medications, ensuring she ate, even when nausea stole her appetite. I tucked blankets around her shoulders when chills shook her, coaxed her into bed when she tried to push through exhaustion. At first, she resisted. "I am not an invalid," she snapped once, shoving away the bowl of soup I offered. "Then prove it by finishing half," I retorted, surprising both of us. Her lips twitched, almost amused, and she ate. In those quiet months, a softness emerged I had never seen before. One evening, as I helped her into bed, she gripped my hand with startling strength. "You were the daughter I never allowed myself to have," she whispered. "Taking you in was the best decision of my life." I froze, tears springing instantly. For years, I had craved words like these, unsure if she truly saw me as more than a responsibility. Hearing them now near the end was like a lock finally clicking open inside me. I leaned closer, voice breaking. You've been my mother all along. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Then we understand each other at last. She passed 8 months later in her sleep, her hand resting loosely on the quilt I had tucked around her. The funeral was small business associates, distant relatives, Mrs. Bentley, the housekeeper, and me. I stood at her graveside, feeling as though the ground itself had opened beneath me. She had been my anchor, my compass, my fortress. And now the silence she left behind was deafening. At night, the house echoed with emptiness. I would pause halfway up the stairs, half expecting to hear her heels on the hardwood or her voice calling out a reminder about tomorrow's schedule. I saved news articles to show her only to remember she was gone. The grief came in waves. Some days it drowned me. Other days, it sat quietly in the corner, watching, waiting to pounce when I least expected it. I told myself I was strong, that Vivian had trained me for this. But the truth was, I felt like that abandoned 13-year-old all over again, sitting in a too-big room, waiting for someone who would never walk through the door. 3 weeks after the funeral, I received a letter from Thompson, her lawyer. The will reading was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I assumed it would be a formality, papers, signatures, maybe a few charitable donations. I didn't know then that Tuesday would change everything. That it would not just reopen my wounds, but rip them wider than ever. Because when I walked into Thompson's office that morning, I wasn't alone. My parents were there, smiling as though 15 years of silence could be erased in an instant. And all the grief I thought I had just begun to manage was about to collide with the betrayal I thought I had buried. Thompson's office smelled of leather, old books, and the faint trace of polished wood. The kind of place where lives were reshaped with signatures and sealed envelopes. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed in a navy suit Vivian would have approved of. My hands shook as I smoothed the fabric. It wasn't grief this time, it was the weight of responsibility. Millions of dollars, an entire company, a legacy that felt far bigger than me. Thompson greeted me warmly, his silver hair immaculate as always. "Lori," he said, clasping my hand, "I know this has been a difficult time. We'll get through today together." I nodded, grateful for his steady presence. I thought it would just be him, perhaps Mrs. Bentley, maybe one of Vivian's executives. I was wrong. The door opened and time fractured. My parents walked in. My father had aged dramatically. His once thick hair was now a thin, gray halo around his head. His shoulders hunched, his frame softened with weight. My mother, by contrast, had grown gaunt. Her blonde hair was cut sharply, her eyes rimmed with dark circles. They froze when they saw me, then smiled too brightly, too practiced. "Lori," my mother breathed, stepping forward. "Look at you, all grown up. You look just like Vivian now, so sophisticated." Her perfume hit me like a ghost, familiar yet alien. She reached to hug me, but my body stayed stiff, rooted to the floor. "We've been waiting so long for this moment," my father added, his voice rough, trying for warmth. The room spun. 15 years of silence reduced to casual greetings. I managed to whisper, "How did you know about today?" "We saw the obituary," my father explained. "We've always kept tabs from a distance. We knew you were with Vivian." A knife twisted in my chest. They knew. All this time they knew where I was, and they never came. Before I could speak, the door opened again. Mrs. Bentley entered quietly, taking a seat in the corner. She gave me a small, sympathetic nod. Her presence was a balm, a reminder of Vivian's steadiness. Thompson cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" He opened a thick folder, his glasses perched low on his nose. "We are here to execute the last will and testament of Vivian Eleanor Hughes." The air grew taut. My parents leaned forward ever so slightly as if ready to pounce. "To my niece Lori Margaret Winters Thompson read, I leave the entirety of my estate. The property at 347 Lakeview Drive and all its contents, my full ownership of Hughes Home Collections, valued at approximately $12 million. All bank accounts, investments, personal effects, and intellectual property." The room went silent. My breath caught. I had known Vivian was successful, but I had never grasped the scope of it. 12 million. The house. Everything. My father coughed softly, feigning casualness. "And, is there anything else?" "There are smaller bequests to employees," Thompson replied, nodding toward Mrs. Bentley, "and instructions for charitable donations from the business profits, but the bulk of the estate passes to Lori." My mother's smile tightened. She reached over and patted my hand, her touch invasive rather than comforting. "Well, this is quite a responsibility for someone so young. Fortunately, as her parents, we can help." The word parents lodged in my throat like glass. Legally speaking, my father added, trying to sound offhand, since Lori was a minor when Vivian took her in, and our parental rights were never formally terminated, we remain her legal guardians. We'd be happy to assist with managing her assets until she has more life experience. The panic that shot through me was sharp physical. After 15 years of silence now, they wanted to manage my inheritance. I opened my mouth to object, but Thompson beat me to it. His tone was calm but firm. I believe there is some confusion about the legal status here. Perhaps it would be best to reconvene tomorrow once I have all relevant documentation prepared. He set the papers down deliberately, his eyes locking on my parents with quiet steel. My father exchanged a glance with my mother, then nodded. That would be fine. We're staying at the Westmont Hotel. Lori, perhaps you'll join us for lunch beforehand to catch up properly. Before I could reply, Thompson rose. I'll need a few moments with Lori in private. Thank you. Reluctantly, my parents stood. My mother pressed a business card into my hand, her handwriting scrawled on the back. Call us any time, sweetheart. We have so much to talk about. Her voice trembled with false sweetness. I didn't answer. The door closed behind them, and I collapsed back into my chair. My hands were shaking, my pulse a hammer in my ears. They can't really have any claim, can they? I asked, my voice breaking. Thompson's expression was grave. Lori, your aunt anticipated this, but you should prepare yourself for a difficult conversation tomorrow. Mrs. Bentley squeezed my shoulder as she left. Your aunt was a wise woman. Trust that she didn't leave you unprotected. But as I sat there in Thompson's office, their perfume still lingering in the air, I felt only dread. The fantasy of my parents returning had finally come true, and it was nothing like I'd ever imagined. Against every bit of Thompson's advice, I agreed to see them. Part of me knew I shouldn't. He'd warned me they were dangerous in subtle ways, that their power lay in the confusion they stirred. But after 15 years of silence, a voice inside me screamed for answers. I wanted to look them in the eye and ask why. So I chose a neutral battleground, an upscale Italian restaurant Vivian had favored for business meetings. Somewhere public, where their words couldn't twist into shouts, and where I wouldn't feel like prey in a closed room. They were already seated when I arrived. My father stood pulling out a chair with exaggerated courtesy. My mother smiled as if we'd just returned from a long vacation apart, not a decade and a half of abandonment. We ordered a bottle of Pinot Noir, my father said. I remember your mother always enjoyed it. I don't drink wine, I replied, asking the waiter for water. It felt important to set a boundary right away to remind them I wasn't 13 anymore. The first 20 minutes were filled with small talk, brittle and surreal. They asked about my education, my job, whether I had friends. My answers were clipped polite, but my eyes studied their faces, searching for traces of the parents I once loved. Finally, my mother leaned forward, her eyes misting. We owe you an explanation. I gripped my glass. Yes, you do. My father cleared his throat, voice practiced but rough. We were in a terrible place back then. I had gambling debts. Dangerous people were after me. Your mother was battling depression. We convinced ourselves you'd be better off with Vivian. She had stability, money, things we couldn't give you. My mother reached for my hand. We thought she could protect you better than we could. We were wrong. I pulled back. You had yourselves. That's all I wanted. The table went still. My father's fork clinked softly against his plate as he set it down. I've been clean for 8 years now. Your mother found the right medication. We've built a stable life. We thought about reaching out, but the shame, it was too much. Shame. That was the word they chose to carry for 15 years, while I carried silence and fear. I pressed harder. If you were so ashamed, why not at least a birthday card? A phone call. They exchanged a glance. My father finally said, We called social services 6 months after we left. They confirmed you were safe with family. Every few years we checked again. So they'd made their inquiries from afar, like people peeking through a window, but never opening the door. It made my stomach twist. My mother's tears spilled over. We regretted it every single day. Seeing you now, so successful, so beautiful, it breaks my heart that we missed it all. Her words should have pierced me. Instead, they sounded rehearsed. The waiter returned with entrees, breaking the tension. For a few moments, only the clatter of silverware filled the space. Then my father leaned back, his voice turning practical. Vivian did well by you, he said, twirling pasta. Better than we could have, and now she's left you set for life. The house alone must be worth $2 million. My mother nodded. Plus the business. It's a lot for someone your age. Overwhelming, really. I've been running the business for years, I said flatly. Of course, my father said smoothly. But there's a difference between helping and carrying the full load. Legal issues, taxes management, it's heavy. That's where we can step in. I studied them. Their tone shifted like salespeople adjusting the pitch, first sympathy, now strategy. What exactly are you asking for? I asked. They blinked, surprised at my bluntness. My mother clasped her hands together as if rehearsing confession. We're not asking for anything. But the truth is, we're drowning in debt. The condo has a second mortgage. Medical bills are piling up. Your father's arthritis treatment's insurance barely covers them. My father cut in. 70,000 would pay off the mortgage. 30 more for the medical bills. 100,000 total. That would change our lives completely. The number hung between us like smoke. I sat back, a cold clarity sliding over me. So, 100,000 would erase 15 years. The nightmares. The therapy bills. The nights I cried myself to sleep, waiting for a phone call. My mother shook her head quickly, tears falling faster. No, money can't fix that. We just want a chance to be a family again. This would help us start fresh. A family that begins with a transaction, I said, voice sharp. My father flinched but recovered. Blood means something, Lori. You're our daughter. I thought of Vivian. She never once said the words I love you. She didn't have to. She showed me day after day by staying. Blood means something, I agreed, but actions mean more. Dessert came and went untouched. They shifted tactics again, suggesting I bring them into the company as advisors paid, of course. They spoke of debts of dreams deferred, of wanting to help. But every sentence circled back to the same point: money. When we finally stepped outside into the cool evening air, my mother hugged me tightly, whispering, "Think about what family really means, sweetheart. We all make mistakes." I stood frozen, letting her words wash over me like acid. Back home, I replayed every word of the dinner in my head, searching for sincerity, but finding only rehearsed lines and veiled requests. My phone buzzed, interrupting the storm in my mind. The caller ID was unfamiliar. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Miss Winters. A woman's voice, hesitant but urgent. "My name is Sandra Kelly. I used to work with your parents years ago at First National Bank. I saw their names linked to Vivian Hughes's obituary. Please, before you make any agreements with them, call me back. There are things you need to know." The line went dead. I sat there, my heart pounding. A stranger knew something about my parents, something that sounded like a warning. And suddenly, Thompson's caution didn't feel paranoid. It felt prophetic. The next morning, I returned to Thompson's office with barely 2 hours of sleep. Sandra Kelly's mysterious message still echoed in my head, but I hadn't had the courage to call her back. Part of me feared I already knew what she'd say. My parents were already there when I arrived, seated side by side in stiff leather chairs. Their clothes were more polished today, my mother's lipstick fresh, my father in a suit that didn't quite fit. Between them sat a thin man with slicked-back hair and a briefcase. "This is Gerald Hoffman," my father said with a practiced smile. "Our attorney. Just a precaution." The word precaution landed like a blade. Thompson entered a moment later, his assistant wheeling in a cart, stacked with expandable files and a laptop. He greeted everyone cordially, though his eyes never warmed. The air crackled, not like a family reunion, but like the opening moves of a battle. Hoffman leaned forward. "My clients are concerned about their daughter inheriting such substantial assets without proper oversight. As her legal guardians, that Thompson cut in smoothly is precisely what we will address today." He opened the first file, pulling out thick folders with colored tabs. His movements were deliberate, every page turned like a weapon unsheathed. When Lori came into Vivian Hughes's care, temporary guardianship was established through family court. Multiple notices were sent to you both regarding permanent arrangements. There was no response. My mother frowned. "We never received anything." "We were moving, dealing with difficult circumstances." Thompson adjusted his glasses. "Interestingly, a man named Louis Barker appeared in court with an affidavit allegedly signed by you both, consenting to permanent guardianship. Miss Hughes suspected fraud and hired a private investigator." He slid photographs across the table. My father entering casinos in Nevada. My mother working as a cocktail waitress. Dates neatly stamped in the corner. "The investigator approached you directly," Thompson continued. "You confirmed your intention to relinquish parental rights the day after Mr. Winters accepted a payment of $15,000 from Louis Barker." The color drained from my mother's face. My father's jaw tightened. "That was an unrelated loan," my father muttered. "Of course," Thompson said, mildly pulling another file. Miss Hughes did not accept your word at face value. She documented every attempt you made to exploit her. For example, he held up a copy of a letter. 6 months after Lori came to live with her, Mr. Winters demanded $50,000 to avoid challenging the guardianship. Vivian paid, fearing a custody battle would traumatize Lori further. My stomach lurched. I glanced at my father, whose face was stone. 3 years later, Thompson went on. He returned, citing gambling debts and threats to his life. Vivian refused and instead hired security. He opened another file. At 16, Mrs. Winters called Vivian claiming she had cancer and needed treatment money. This was confirmed false. At 18, when Lori received her college acceptance, you contacted Vivian again, requesting tuition funds as a fresh start. Each time, Vivian blocked further communication. Tears blurred my vision. My hands clenched the armrests until my knuckles whitened. Then Thompson produced a sealed envelope, my name written across it in Vivian's unmistakable handwriting. "She left this for you," he said gently, "meant to be opened only in this circumstance." My heart pounded. I broke the seal with trembling fingers. Pages unfolded in my lap, filled with her precise script. "My dearest Lori." I read aloud, though my voice wavered. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone and your parents have resurfaced. I regret that you must face them now, but I wanted you armed with the truth." The room fell silent. My parents shifted uncomfortably. "Over the years, they attempted to extract money using you as leverage. I shielded you from this so you could heal. When you were 16, I completed a step you were never told: legal adoption. You became my daughter in every way that mattered. They have no claim to you or to the life we built together." My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. "Family is not blood alone, Lori. It is commitment. It is sacrifice. Protect yourself. I trust you will know who truly deserves your loyalty." I lowered the pages, tears spilling freely now. The silence broke with my father's voice, hard and defensive. "This is absurd. We never agreed to any adoption." Thompson calmly produced the signed court documents. Legal, binding, irrefutable. And if we contest, Hoffman asked quietly, "Then, per Miss Hughes's will, the entire estate transfers to a foundation for abandoned children. Lori receives nothing. Neither do you." For the first time, Hoffman looked rattled. He leaned toward my parents, whispering urgently. My mother shook her head in disbelief, tears streaking her makeup. "Lori, this isn't who we are. We just wanted a chance." "No," I said softly, my voice steadier than I felt. "You wanted money." Thompson wasn't finished. He opened one last file. Vivian also investigated a pattern. Multiple families, multiple attempts. You approached others after wealthy relatives died claiming kinship. It was your scheme. My father's face flushed crimson. "That's a lie." But the photos, the statements, the timelines said otherwise. I leaned forward, the weight of Vivian's letter still in my hands. "She protected me from you while she was alive, and even now she's protecting me. That's the difference between you and her. She stayed. You didn't." My mother sobbed openly. My father's fists clenched, but Hoffman touched his arm, urging restraint. Thompson closed the files with finality. "This matter is settled. Lori is legally the sole heir. Any attempt to interfere will not only fail, but result in criminal consequences." As the meeting ended, I felt both hollow and strangely fortified. I had dreamed for years that my parents' return would bring closure. Instead, it brought confirmation. Confirmation that Vivian had been my true parent all along. Confirmation that love is proven in actions, not blood. And yet, as I walked out of that office, clutching Vivian's letter, I couldn't shake the dread curling in my stomach. Because people like my parents didn't walk away quietly. And I knew this wasn't over. That evening, I stood in the kitchen slicing vegetables for dinner, trying to quiet the storm in my head. Vivian's letter sat folded in my pocket like a talisman. For the first time, I felt secure, protected even in her absence. Then headlights swept across the windows. A car rolled into the driveway. My stomach dropped. I moved to the foyer and peeked through the glass. There they were, my parents. I considered not answering. But something inside me, maybe Vivian's discipline, maybe my own need for closure, forced me to the door. When I opened it, I didn't step aside. I stood in the doorway, blocking their entry. "You can't be here," I said firmly. "A restraining order was filed this morning." My father's face hardened. "We're still your parents, Lori. You owe us the decency of a conversation without lawyers and guards breathing down our necks." "You don't get to use that word," I said. "Parents don't disappear for 15 years and then reappear for a bank account." My mother pushed past me anyway, her eyes darting hungrily around the grand foyer. She trailed her hand along the banister as if assessing its value. "This house," she whispered, "it's magnificent." Then turning back, her eyes glistened. "Lori, we just want to understand why you're being so cold. We made mistakes, yes, but we're here now. Can't we start over?" By trying to take my inheritance, I shot back. Her expression crumpled. "We were desperate. We still are. But that doesn't erase our love for you." "You loved me so much," I said bitterly, "that you left me alone in an apartment with nothing but a note." My father entered now, ignoring my protests. His voice rose sharp and angry. "That woman poisoned you against us. Vivian always resented me. She used you to punish me." I stepped closer, fury shaking my voice. "Vivian saved me. She gave me stability, education. She stayed. You left." My mother's tears spilled over mascara running. "We were sick, Lori. Depression, addiction. They're illnesses. We needed help, not judgment." I was 13, I shouted, finally breaking. 13! I needed parents, not excuses. My voice cracked. "Do you have any idea what it was like? Waking up to silence the closet? Empty the note on the counter? Do you know how many nights I waited by the phone praying you'd call? How many birthdays I blew out candles, wishing you'd come back?" My father looked away, jaw tight. My mother pressed her hands to her mouth, sobbing. "I checked the mailbox every day for months," I continued, words spilling like floodwater. "I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd send a card. A sign I wasn't forgotten. But you didn't. Not once." My father tried again, voice softening into his salesman's pitch. "We can't change the past, but we can build something now. We can be a family again." "No," I said, my voice suddenly calm. "You're here now because Vivian died wealthy. If she had died penniless, you would have stayed gone." The silence that followed was louder than shouting. Their faces said everything. Thompson's investigator reports had shown me the truth they'd known where I was for years. They'd chosen silence until there was money on the table. "You had 15 years, I whispered. 15 years to come back. You waited until there was an inheritance. That tells me everything I need to know." My father's face twisted. "You think you're better than us because of her money. Don't forget where you came from. I am her brother. That fortune was built with the seed money our parents left. It belongs to me as much as it does to you." "Biology isn't an entitlement program," I said coldly. "Vivian worked 16-hour days to build this. You contributed nothing." My mother collapsed into one of Vivian's antique chairs, sobbing. "How did you become so heartless? This isn't the daughter we raised." "You didn't raise me," I said. "You abandoned me. Vivian raised me. She finished what you couldn't." At that moment, flashing lights spilled across the driveway. A patrol car. Thompson had arranged for checks on the property, anticipating this very scene. "That will be the police," I said quietly. "You need to leave." My father's mask slipped. He stepped forward, grabbed my arm roughly. "This isn't over. We can make your life very difficult. You think money makes you untouchable. We can ruin her reputation. Tell stories. Drag her name through the mud." I yanked my arm free, pointing to the camera mounted in the corner of the foyer. "Every word you say is being recorded. Vivian installed these years ago after your first attempt at extortion. Keep talking." For the first time, my father faltered, the realization sinking in. The doorbell rang, an officer at the door. My parents stiffened. My father muttered, "Come on, she's not worth it." Those words, the same tone he might have used about a bad hand at a poker table, were the final nail. I wasn't worth the trouble. Not a daughter, not a loss, just an inconvenience. As they walked out, my mother turned, her voice trembling with bitterness. "You'll regret this when you're alone. Family is everything." "I agree," I said evenly. "That's why Vivian was my family. You were just DNA." The officer escorted them down the driveway, their figures shrinking in the blue-red wash of police lights. I closed the door, leaned against it, and let the silence swallow me. My whole body trembled with adrenaline, but inside, a strange calm took root. For 15 years, I'd carried the fantasy that their return would fix me. Now I understood the truth: closure doesn't always heal. Sometimes it burns the bridge so you can finally stop looking back. 6 months have passed since that night. 6 months since I watched my parents escorted down the driveway under the flashing red and blue of police lights, their threats fading into the distance. They haven't come back. Thompson secured a restraining order, ironclad. Any further contact must go through his office. The law is on my side, and for once I believe in its protection. But even with them gone, the echoes of their words linger. Family is everything, my mother had whispered as the police led her away. And she was right in a way. Family is everything, just not the way she meant. The mansion feels different now. Less like Vivian's house, more like mine. I've repainted rooms, softened the rigid formality with pieces that reflect me. A bright rug here, a stack of books there. Yet I've kept her touches intact, the study with its ledgers, the heavy velvet curtains in the dining room. It's not about erasing her, it's about weaving her life and mine together into something new. The company thrives under my direction. I modernized the marketing, expanded our online presence, opened 2 new stores. Employees who once looked to Vivian for leadership now look to me. And more than once, someone has said, "You sound just like her." It's the highest compliment I could ever receive. But her legacy doesn't live only in profits and expansion. With a portion of the inheritance, I established the Vivian Hughes Foundation, dedicated to children who, like me, have experienced abandonment or family separation. We provide therapy mentorship, scholarships, transitional housing for those aging out of foster care. At our first open house, a 16-year-old girl stood shyly in the corner. Her parents had left her 2 years earlier. She looked at me with the same lost eyes I once saw in the mirror. I told her, "This isn't your fault, and you're not alone anymore." For the first time, I understood what Vivian must have felt the night she took me in, terrified, unprepared, but determined. And I realized I had inherited more than money. I had inherited her strength. Sometimes I still catch myself waiting for Vivian's footsteps on the hardwood, or for her clipped voice reminding me to tighten up your arguments before a meeting. Then I find her in unexpected ways. Mrs. Bentley, her longtime housekeeper, still visits twice a week. One afternoon, she confessed something quietly over tea. The night you moved in, Vivian sat in the kitchen at 3 a.m., researching child development. She was terrified she'd ruin you, but she never let you see it. That image, the formidable woman secretly Googling parenting tips in the middle of the night, broke me open. For all her composure, Vivian had been scared too, and yet she stayed. That's what made her a mother. Thompson has also become more than just an attorney. At one dinner, he admitted Vivian asked me to be your godfather when she adopted you. I've always thought of you as my responsibility too. Hearing that brought fresh tears. Another layer of family I hadn't known I had. And then there's the letter I received from my mother 3 months ago. Handwritten, no demands, no requests, just regret. She wrote, "We failed you. We don't deserve forgiveness, but we hope someday you'll find it in your heart to remember us kindly." The letter sits in my desk drawer. I haven't replied. Maybe I never will, or maybe one day I'll find the strength to write back. Not for them, but for me. Romance has crept back into my life too. Nothing serious yet, but when I meet someone new, I measure them not by their words, but by their consistency. Vivian taught me that love isn't in declarations, it's in actions. Who shows up? Who stays? And slowly, I'm learning to let people in without expecting them to vanish. Last weekend, I visited Vivian's grave. The black granite headstone gleamed in the afternoon sun, her name carved with the dignity she always carried. Beneath it, I had one word added, "Mother." I placed fresh lilies, her favorite, and stood there in silence. "Thank you," I whispered, "for staying, for teaching me what family means." The wind rustled the trees, carrying the faint scent of earth and blossoms. I closed my eyes and felt her presence not in the mansion, not in the company, but in me. Because her greatest inheritance wasn't money or property. It was the conviction that family is chosen through love, loyalty, and sacrifice. And that was something my parents could never touch. So when people ask me now, "Do you ever regret losing your real parents?" I answer simply, I didn't lose them. They lost me. And in their absence, I found someone better. Vivian wasn't just my aunt. She was my mother, my anchor, my protector. And though she's gone, she is still the family I choose.